Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Greater Napanee special session of council for the second day of November 2023. We'll call the meeting to order. Look for a motion for the adoption of the agenda as presented. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Sorry, and I should remind everyone that this evening's meeting is being live streamed on our YouTube channel and also recorded, so you could watch it later on if you wish. So sorry about that. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Items for discussion. The presentation of the draft 2024 utilities budget. And I believe, Ms. Kelly, are you going to be presenting this evening? The floor is yours.
Perfect. So we have myself and Kyle Sinclair here tonight. Kyle is our utilities operations manager and does the majority of the work behind the scenes on this budget to put the numbers together. But unfortunately, I think I've been nominated to do most of the speaking. So he's available for questions or as needed throughout. And as we go through, I think what we'll do is probably easiest is once we get into the presentation, as we finish each slide, I'll kind of do a quick look around the room if there's any questions then, and then we can address additional questions at the end of the presentation if that works. So our proposed 2024 budget is expected to remain debt-free while continuing to provide adequate financial resources to undertake some substantial capital work. That includes a wastewater plant phase 1 and partial phase 2 expansion that we'll get into later. Our rate increases have been typically slightly above inflationary costs, and we are recommending this year to go with a 3% increase, and we will get into that in greater detail as we move on here. So this is just a very high level where we're at, and again, later on we'll kind of dive deeper into each section, but our projected revenue for 2023 is approximately or expected to be $209,000 over budgeted by the end of the year. I guess one thing I should kind of step back and note, we did have a bit of challenge putting together this budget just because of the timing. So projected revenues for 2023 were actually only based on 4 out of 6 of our billing cycles. So, you know, we just recently completed another billing, so now we have 5, but at the time putting this together, we did just have the 4. And then also with that, we had a bit of challenge kind of, you know, trying to anticipate the costs between now and the end of the year, as you know, there's still 2 full months left, but here we are. So our projected year-end expenditures for 2023 are higher than budgeted by approximately $40,000. And again, this is us estimating chemical purchases and that sort of thing till the remainder of the year. So that might fluctuate a little bit right as the year closes, but that's what we're expecting to be. Our reserve balances are and continue to be at an all-time high, totaling almost $3 million. We've secured federal funding for our wastewater plant expansion, and we expect by the end of this year to use $2.4 million of that, and in 2024 for that budget, $2.7 million. And the remainder of that $14 million probably into 2025 and 26. We've also secured provincial funding. This is specific to improving our discharges to water and wastewater and stormwater into ultimately into Lake Ontario. So we secured $527,000 for that, and we will claim that before the end of 2023 as well, and we'll kind of give a bit more detail on that later in the presentation. We feel that our rates remain fairly competitive with other local municipalities, and as mentioned, we're moving forward on the wastewater plant project. This year we did start the maintenance garage, and actually I'm not going to talk anymore on that until I flip the slide. There we go. So we began the construction of the maintenance garage, or what we call phase 1 of the wastewater plant project this year. and are beginning the detailed design phase of phase 2 of that project, which is the actual wastewater plant process and expansion. So in early 2024, we expect to complete the detailed design and provide council with a financing strategy for that next stage, that phase 2 of the project. Based on current schedules, it looks like we could be in a position to break ground for that phase 2 in late 2024. So as mentioned, we've secured $14 million in federal funding, but we continue to pursue that funding at a federal or a provincial level. So we are recommending a 3% increase. And this would be to both base and consumption charges on a water and sewer bill, as well as most other services, unless we specifically note later in the presentation, but most of them will receive that 3%. And what that amounts to the average customer bi-monthly is about $6.08. So this is just a visual to show our average residential water consumption over the past several years. So far in 2023, again, based on those 4 billings, our average consumption was 24.5 cubic meters per billing cycle, which is very slightly lower than the 24.9 in 2022. We have seen significant drops in consumption since 2008, when our average bi-monthly usage was 40.5 cubic meters. So just some key notes about the average consumption. We currently have 3,563 customers serviced by our utilities, so water and sewer customers, and 88% of those are residential users. So these customers, these residential customers, account for approximately 59% of our billed water revenue. And just to kind of go into a bit of where the fixed and variable rate fluctuates on a water bill, at 25 cubic meters bi-monthly, the fixed portion of our utility bill would be 52%, where the variable would be 48%. But as water consumption increases, that fixed percentage becomes much smaller. So as you can see, our projected year-end expenditures are expected to be approximately $40,000 over the approved 2023 budget. This is a result of emergency purchases for things like the lift station pumps. I believe we spoke about this in an earlier meeting. Regarding the emergency purchase, we had station repairs and a larger scale sanitary sewer repairs. So this overage is offset by an overage in projected revenue, which will be discussed later in the presentation. But it should be noted that many of the items in our operating budgets are subject to fluctuating operating demand. So year-end variances are often expected due to basically the unpredictability of our system and the emergency repairs that are often or sometimes required there. The proposed 2024 budget increased by just over $201,000. There is an error on that slide. It states 102 or 192. It should be 201,000. And that's essentially to reflect projected operational needs and to account for the inflation we are seeing on things like fuel and chemicals and that sort of thing. So this growth also represents an increase in administrative fees like hydro and telephone, but it also, as just mentioned, includes costs like additional costs and treatment chemicals for our facilities. Other notable operational needs include just necessary maintenance and upkeep on our equipment at both our water treatment and wastewater treatment facilities. There will be water intake inspections completed in 2024, and we plan to purchase and install a new turbidity analyzer at one of our treatment plants. So that's all included in that increase for operating. So let me catch up here. So we've included some key notes here, and you can reference the lines they reference are for the the draft budget summary that should be provided in your notes. But specific to 2023 and the projected year end, we expect to be over budget by approximately $12,000 for a wastewater treatment plant due to necessary repairs for aging infrastructure. And as mentioned several times, the increase in costs we saw related to chemicals and natural gas. Line 29 speaks to an overage of $43,000 for significant sanitary sewer repairs and parts and then asphalt repairs and sidewalk repairs associated with that or with those repairs. It should be noted specific to that line, I guess, that our staff were able to repair a significant defect in our sanitary sewer this year. Well, many, but one specifically on John Street. And this in-house repair allowed us to defer a major capital project that was originally slotted for the 2024 budget. So that kind of explains a bit of that overage there. Line 36 speaks to an overage that was presented to council earlier this year regarding emergency pump purchase for our lift stations. And line 42, 43, and 56 show significant savings in projected year end due to fewer emergency repair requirements for our sewer services and in our water distribution system. So these lines are fairly difficult to predict, and they're definitely subject to fluctuating demands depending on the type of year we have and breaks and that sort of thing. For specific to 2024, line 24 includes the lease back on our 45 commercial court building. So there's a bit of a charge there or a fee. And line 27 allows for a $55,000 increase to accommodate those treatment chemicals, hydro, and heating expected for the wastewater treatment plant. The 2024 salaries and benefits portion shows a nearly 8% decrease from the 2023 budget. This is a result of a full-time position being moved to contract, and it's expected to include a more accurate representation of our projected salaries for 2024. I guess it's important to note that year-end salary allocations fluctuate between each individual GL line based upon actual workload and system requirements, but we've kind of streamlined to putting them into one, basically, instead of putting them at, this operator worked at the wastewater treatment plant this many hours and such, we try to keep them in one general line to kind of give consistency and show where our expenses are. So for capital projects, in 2024, we expect to, or we're looking to complete pre-engineering work for a number of projects. And basically what we're looking to do here is have these projects shelf ready for future years. So what we're looking for is to do the pre-engineering work on Thomas Street from Belleville Road to Simcoe Street, Napier Street, which includes Dundas Street to the dead end, Hesford Street from Dundas Street to Water Street, and Water Street from Union to Hesford. And then this also would include pre-engineering for a future joint project with the county, which is the Dundas Street Phase 4 project, which includes Dundas Street from Adelphi to the train trestle. And again, this will allow us to have these projects shelf ready for future budgets. In this here, we've also included the cost for relining a section of water main on Jim Kimmett Boulevard. This cost, you can't see there, I believe it's $550. Okay, thank you. Is for a relining of a clay line ductile iron water main that we've had significant break history on in behind the DevCore building on Jim Kimmett. So what we've done with that, we've included the upset limit as a relining, but we're also looking at potential options of just a full replacement of what's there rather than relining. So as staff will work behind the scenes and see what's best for that line, but we've included the upset limit, but it could be significantly less depending on what route we take there. We're planning to replace 2 chlorine pumps at our Lake Ontario intake for the AL Dayfo drinking water system. So this provides us pre-chlorine and helps reduce zebra mussels in our intake line. We've budgeted 5.4 million for the wastewater treatment plant expansion in 2024. So this includes the completion of the maintenance building, allowing for the continuation of the design phase. And as mentioned earlier, it may include a bit of construction that could potentially begin at the end of 2024 for that phase 2 of the project. Once the detailed design is complete, which we expect probably by Q2 2024, we'll come back to council with a full funding strategy on that plant. At the wastewater plant itself, we have budgeted to install a sludge loading pump. So this pump was previously purchased, so we're just looking to install that this year and included some costs associated with that, as well as the replacement of a heat exchanger. So these capital upgrades are associated with our biosolids handling process and will benefit the future of the plant. It's not like we're looking to invest in infrastructure that will be no longer used after we expand the plant. So this will continue on and be a benefit to us. Other items include a forklift replacement. Again, this is another one where we've kind of had to put an upset limit. This is a cost for a full brand new forklift or potentially. What we're looking or hoping to do is find a refurbished or one off a lease. But from what we've been told, the forklifts that we're looking for come and go very quickly. So we have to be ready. So we've put kind of the upset limit, but our expectation is not to spend that full amount there. And this is for our staff to have deliveries formerly at 45 Commercial Court, but at the new maintenance building and safely unload things there. The truck replacement is a placeholder at this time. It's my understanding that a presentation will come to council with the town operating budget to decide how we're moving forward with fleet and that sort of thing. So we've put this number in as a placeholder and we'll await that meeting. But and then the plow and mount. So we had expected to replace one of our vehicles this year in 2023, and that didn't happen. So we're just looking to carry this plow and mount forward. So we use the truck that needs replacement and to plow all of our stations, our plants out and that sort of thing. So we're just looking to carry that over from 2023. And once we have a new truck for that, we'll be moving forward or planning to move forward with the purchase of a plow and mount for that. Some other things, a portable traffic light purchase. This is, we expect or hope that this can be a joint purchase with our Public Works Department. So we've included half the cost of this. This will significantly have an impact on our in-ground repairs and probably a significant amount on the Public Works operations for safety and allowing a change in the way traffic control works. We need to update a part of our billing software. There was a purchase a couple years ago to upgrade some of the capabilities of that software, but there's an additional upgrade required for us to use that system. And every year we purchase water meters. We're looking, correct me, 200 usually. We purchase 200 water meters to continue on with our water meter replacement program. And we need to do some upgrades on our SCADA system. So for those that are unaware, our SCADA system is essentially the computer system that runs our water treatment plants. And we're having some issues with the, I guess, supplier of that, and we're looking to transfer that over to someone else to assist us with those needs. So that's the capital budget for 2024, or our requests there. Maybe I'll just pause here in case there were questions specific to the capital.
Thanks, Christy. I think it's a good place to stop. Does anybody have any questions of Christy of what we've heard so far? Councillor Pennell, and then we'll go to Deputy Mayor Carver.
Thank you. Through your worship, Christie, maybe you just misspoke, but when we're going through this, sorry, I have to go back here, but you said something about $3 million, but actually, I think I read that we had, sorry, I have to do this. We should have maybe stopped every slide because I have a bunch of questions, but it says reserve balance are an all-time high totaling 12.8 million, and I believe you spoke about 3 million. So is it right that it's 12.8 million that we have here?
For our reserve balances? Yes, we'll get to the reserves later, but yes, 12.8 million.
Okay, thanks. And so we don't want to talk about the truck purchase yet. You're saying that something else is going to be coming back to us on that?
That's correct.
That's not probably not currently what we're doing now. So I got to gather my thoughts because I really would have liked to have stopped every.
No problem. We got
slide.
all kinds of time. Don't worry about it, Councillor Pennell. Deputy Mayor Carver.
So you're looking at $80,000 as a high end for a forklift replacement, correct? And with the new building, are you putting in a loading dock there at the new building?
Through your worship, no, we're not putting a loading dock on there. This is more so for when we get deliveries of pipe, parts, things like that, that come on a 18-foot trailer that we have to unload and then bring into the shop. We don't have the equipment to do that currently.
Okay, so you're talking side loading off of a flatbed type thing?
Correct.
And so this forklift would be an outdoor capability forklift?
Correct.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. If it's easier, Councillor Pennell, we can go back to page 1 or 2 if you want, and just go page by page for your questions. Would that be simpler?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Yes, please. Thanks.
May I suggest we just continue on and then go back through, or would you want me to stop here?
Well, we stopped here, so why don't we just continue on then, and then we'll just do it all right from the beginning again.
And you may
Thank you.
And you may find that some of your questions may be answered as Christie moves down through her presentation. So why don't we do it that way then? Okay, go ahead, Christie.
Thank you. So this chart was just to display our historical capital debentures for the past 6 years, and looking forward into 2024, we will have zero debt. And again, this will very likely change, or probably for sure change in the future as we develop the wastewater plant project further. This slide was created to show where projected revenue would come from for 2024. Again, the slide is one that will change significantly from year to year. For example, in 2024, we expect to see a large portion of federal funding for the wastewater plant project, and therefore the pie kind of drastically changes there, or will drastically change when the funding is no longer available in future years. As you can see, a large portion of our revenue comes from water and sewer charges, both residential and commercial, as well as those capital surcharges. The various costs recovered portion amounts to $23,000 in revenue, and it includes things like hydro fees for rents, sanitary, sewer, camera inspections, account termination, and recoveries, and that sort of thing. There are a few things regarding revenue that we should point out here. There have been 62 new customers to date in 2023. 56 of those are residential customers. And just for your reference, the average growth of our residential customers over the past 5 years has been 39. So, 2023, we saw significant growth in our community, or in our urban community, with water and sewer. We are seeing an increase in revenue on our residential water and sewer charges, which can be explained by that community growth and our regular increases to rates, as our average residential consumption has actually decreased. Line 10 on this the summary sheet you received speaks to that federal funding that I've mentioned a few times now related to that wastewater treatment plant project. And we expect to, in 2023 for the projected year end, again, we expect to use $2.4 million of that. And in 2024, we're expecting to use $2.7 million. And line 11 shows that $527,000 in revenue that we mentioned came from provincial funding to be put towards improving our water and wastewater discharges, or sorry, wastewater and stormwater discharges. We expect to put a full claim in before the end of the year for that full amount, as we are able to address major inflow and infiltration on our East Street project this year. So the funding did need to be used up by the end of Q1 for 2024. So this project fit really well with that funding. A few other things to point out. Again, this is up to the end of September, but there at that time, there had been 9,011 loads of water from our medium fill station so far this year. And our small fill station had given out an equivalent of 1.3 million water bottles so far in water. So this chart was just created to give a quick snapshot of where our rate increases are and have been over the past several years. The department has an average of just under 2% increase over the past 5 years. And again, the proposed 3% increase is to account for the increases we are seeing on things like chemicals, fuel, hydro, that sort of thing. This is just showing, giving an idea of what that 3% increase could mean to our revenue. It should be noted that this is not linear, and as not every line item sees that 3% increase. Some revenue lines with the budget are flatlined or adjusted manually based on historical data. Here's the impact to the average customer. Again, $6.08 bi-monthly, or the equivalent of 3 Tim Hortons coffees or 1 Starbucks coffee bi-monthly. This is based on average usage only. So if you are a higher water user, the impact obviously will be more. So our proposed 2024 budget is just over $11 million, with $2.7 million of that subsidized from funding at the federal level. In 2021 and 2022, that light blue line showed grant funding only and not funding from reserves, whereas for 2023, our projected year end, we expect to have funded the budget as presented last year by $1.1 million from our reserves. And in 2024, we're looking at, with that 3% increase, we would use $900,000 from our reserves. Looking back on previous years, you'll see through this table or chart that it is not that it is common to utilize our reserves to help fund the budget as needed. And we're comfortable doing so based on our reserve balances, and that, you know, we don't have to dip into that every year. So our current rate schedule provides one lower rate for commercial and industrial consumption when they get greater than that 1,000 cubic meter. So this doesn't apply to our residential users, and it's just for those industrial and commercial users. The declining block rate structure is a 15+ year transition that's so far had zero negative feedback from our local industry. We do closely monitor consumption from our large user groups and take that into consideration when we're setting our rate increases. But in theory, by 2027, both residential and commercial users will pay the same rate per cubic meter. So a little more on that, looking at the graph, if a customer is using 0 to 1,000 cubic meters, regardless if you are a residential or commercial customer, you're paying the same rate. But once that usage is over 1,000 cubic meters, the commercial and industrial users will pay more for water. And then the bulk water rates to the to the right are higher due to the increased demand they do put on our system. So our proposed 2024 rate schedule is available. If we click here, I don't know if anyone wanted to go through it line by line, but it is certainly available there if you so wish. But it includes a 3% increase to most line items with an additional 3% increase to those consumption charges over 1,000 cubic meters as part of that declining block rate structure, as we just noted. We are recommending to keep the 3% increase for hauled sewage for 2024. We expect to adjust this rate in the coming years when we have completed the design of the wastewater treatment plant expansion to more accurately reflect the actual treatment costs we see on that. But currently, we're comfortable with just adding the 3% there. Or how to calculate your water bill formula is also available and has been updated to include our 2023 average consumption of 24.5 cubic meters bi-monthly and our 2024 proposed rates. So that if you did the calculation within that, it would show that our average bi-monthly water sewer bill based on that 24.5 cubic meter bi-monthly consumption, it would be about $214. So each year we like to do a rate comparison with other local municipalities. So this chart is showing 7 other local municipalities in our general area, and that 4 of those do have higher rates than Greater Napanee. But it's important to note that when we compare these rates, there are many variables that can impact that. So neighboring rates are worth looking at, but the comparison isn't really apples to apples. Like they could have different treatment technologies, different service levels, and economies to scale play a huge factor in setting their rates. So it's worth looking at, but yeah, it's not everything. The current fixed and variable rate portions within Greater Napanee's rate structure allow the security to help address our fixed costs while providing some flexibility to our customers for water conservation and savings if they so wish. So here's our reserve balances. In total, they're just over $7.1 million in our capital and maintenance reserves. These balances are based on previous year's auditor's report. So this one's actually from 2021. We're working on the 2022 currently, but we expect it to be pretty close to what we've projected here. Our impost and working reserves are also in a good position with over $3.6 million there. In 2023, we did change the way our impost fees were collected. They're now included with our development charges. So while we haven't provided a breakdown since this change in this presentation, I expected that there is additional funds there from the development charges that can be allocated to the utilities and related to development in the future. Again, those funds are to be used for growth-related infrastructure needs. And it's anticipated that we'll need to draw from this at some point during the wastewater treatment plant project. The impost reserve is funded solely from development and not from individual water and sewer customers. The current balance of our working reserve is over $1.6 million. This reserve could be compared to a personal savings account. And we hold these funds for a major operational need in the future. So this historically was created in the 90s, this reserve, as an emergency reserve after our utility experienced a surge in frozen service lines during an extremely cold winter. Management at the time determined the need for it and capped it at $250,000. So it's grown a bit since then, but we don't actively put money in there, but we're working to determine a healthy balance for that to kind of keep it there for emergencies in the future. So in summary, this is just showing an overview of the 2023 budget, the 2023 projected year-end balances, and our 2024 proposed budget. When comparing the 2024 projected revenue of over $9.8 million, to the total expenses that are expected to be just over $10.7 million. We anticipate the need to pull $900,000 from reserves in 2024. And I'm sure there's probably lots of questions, so we can start there. I'm available for questions, or we can go back through the presentation, whichever you
think-
so wish.
Thanks, Christy. I think maybe if we go back and we'll just recap each slide, and it might be easier that way. So
Sure.
we can start. I think we need to do the table of contents, summary of the utilities budget. Let's start there. Does anybody have any questions with respect to the summary that was provided? There's a staff recommendation there of 3% increase to user rates for 2024. Yep, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So what my question is just to clarify for myself, is that 3%, and that is, you want to have 3% across the board. That is the water rates, that's the sewage rate, that's 3% for every item. So I'm not on water and sewer, so you're gonna have to teach me this again. If a person gets a water and sewer bill, you get your water charge, all right, and you have a sewage charge. So if they get 3% here and 3% there, are they getting a total of 6% increase? Or is that gonna be averaged throughout just 3% on a total bill? I didn't know if you were compounding it or not.
So it is, Kylie, I don't know if it's too challenging, but it might be worth opening up one of the links on slide 22. It shows our rate schedule, and we can just kind of quickly, the top one there, yeah. Sorry, the one above it. So I can begin. I believe it was $1.06 or thereabouts per cubic meter currently for water for a residential user, and again the same consumption rate for wastewater. So I believe it went up to $1.09. Yes, based on sorry, it was $1.06 for our water, and it's gone to $1.09, and our sewer rate proposed for 2023 is $1.42 per cubic meter.
Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So, Christy, so it's 3% increase. The only reason why I was going at one of the graphs you were showing, in the 12 years, this year was the 24.5 cubic meters was the average household that was used, but that is the lowest number, tied with one other year in 12 years. So people are conserving, all right?
Exactly.
But
So we're seeing,
considering it's only cost, I think was it, if I remember correctly, without going through it again, it was in 2017, 2012, it was $170. And they used 27.1 cubic meters. In 2023, they used 25.3, and the bill was $207, I think, what you were doing. So when you consider you've only had a $30 increase, you're using less, mind you, but you've only increased. I wish inflation would be that low for everything. You know what I mean? So I just want to, if I do get asked a question, all right, then I just want to know the answers correctly so I can give them the qualified response back of what they're doing. So it's just a 3% across the board. It's not compounded. It's just, right, Nathan? Nathan's nodding at me and he's agreeing. So I just saw it's sticking in here.
so
All right.
so just to clarify, the 3% is on our consumption and our base charges. So while the average user is going to see a difference of, or an increase of just over $6, they absolutely can reduce their usage and adjust accordingly. So the base charges will have that 3% as well. So the base charges for bi-monthly for water, a regular 3/4 inch meter is $33.44. And again, for sewer, that will remain. Right. So, but based on their water usage, they can certainly adjust the consumption rate for sure.
Yep, go ahead, Counselor Shank.
So, so that bill also is is for sewage also, the $207. Is that this year, or is that just water? That's
That's
water and sewer.
Water and sewer based on the average water use. Yes.
So
that a
$6 on a $200 bill.
I can't say for sure, but what we've done is our usage total for residential users based on that size of the meter. That's what the average household uses.
Yep, go ahead, Counselor Purnell.
Thank you, worship. Maybe I can just jump into this too. Christie, I believe that we're talking about 3% across the board, so it was on other charges as well. So I'm looking at a water bill here now that has a capital improvement surcharge and maintenance surcharge. Would those two be applicable to the 3% as well? And I think that's what Councillor Shank is talking of.
So through your worship, those, the capital and maintenance surcharge is essentially 66%. And that is based on the base rate and your usage. So that won't change the percentage, the 66%, but it's based on those rates, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks. So basically, we would be right by saying that the capital improvement surcharge and the maintenance surcharge will be affected by this rate increase.
The rate of it wouldn't be, but
The
math of
charge
it
will
would.
be, right?
Kylie, sorry, on that slide, the one below will show a breakdown of basically how your water bill is calculated. It may be beneficial to take a quick look there. Sorry, on the slide. Putting you on the spot. $22.
Sure, if it doesn't,
Sure.
confuse Christie, absolutely. Go ahead, Counselor Shank.
Christie, it's a whole different slide, but we have a small fill station. And you did 1.3 million water bottles equivalent to 637 cubic meters. And that's free to residents?
Yes, our small fill station is located at the front of our water treatment plant at 75 East Street. So yes, that's free to residents. It's usually used for up to 18-liter jugs, that sort of thing, household use, essentially, yeah.
What is a
So our medium fill station through you is located at the other side of the water treatment plant, and it gives out essentially a cubic meter of water for $2 to our users. So they are required to bring their own hose and fittings, but you put in a toonie or $2 and you'll receive approximately 1 cubic meter of water.
Is that cost recovery?
So through you, we are offering it at a different rate than our bulk haulers, but this is essentially the water is leaving our treatment plant and it's not going through in-ground infrastructure, so it doesn't have the same demand on our system. It's essentially just treated and put out there. So currently we are comfortable with the $2 cost. As our costs continue to increase, we will need to continue to look at that each year and see if it needs to be altered.
Yep, go ahead, Counselor Shank.
May I ask what is a large fill station? Like, if you ordered like a big truckload of water, what do they pay?
So currently they pay, I think it's $2.45 based on the 2023 rate schedule per cubic meter of water. And they are required to have an account with us. And they're people often that need to use it for commercial or construction uses and that sort of thing.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. Do we find our slide that we we're looking for the original question, I think?
Yes, so this was just created to kind of help people understand how the water bill is calculated, or water and sewer bill, utilities bill. So there's the base rate proposed for 2024. And then the usage would be based on average consumption of 24.5. So it'd be times $1.09 per cubic meter for water. And then down below by $1.42 for the sewer charge. And then all three of those, the base charge and the consumption charges, would be added together for $128. And then we would add our capital maintenance surcharge at 66% there, giving the total bill of about $214.
Yep, okay, great. With respect to the original slide, is there any other further questions, or we'll go ahead, Councillor Pennell?
Thank you, Worship. If we could just go back to slide 6, please. I guess where I was confused with it, and I thought Councillor Shank was going with it, was the staff recommendation of the 3%. And then the 1% is 68,753. The next line is that the 3% increase will be applied to all other service fees within the current rate schedule. So that's where I'm getting a little confused on these maintenance surcharges.
Sorry, through your worship. Just trying to bring this back up, but the rate schedule is just because we have different rates per different size meters and that sort of thing. We're suggesting that we add the 3% to all of those different fees. As mentioned earlier, there are certain things that a reprint on a bill or a history, that sort of thing. We're not adding the 3% there, but the majority of the line items would have the 3%.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Is there anything further, or did we want to move on to the next slide then? The executive summary, is there any questions with respect to the information that's on that? And that would be page 4 of the presentation. Councillor Pennell?
Thank you, Worship. Through you, the reserve balances are at all-time high of totaling 12.8 million. And I just saw that on that other sheet they had with the bubbles that we're going to be stating what our current reserve balances are, which I'm all in favor of clarity on that. I just have a little bit of a hard time with the statement saying that we're at an all-time high record $12.8 million in reserves, and yet then we're going to go out and ask for a higher increase than what we did over last year. It just doesn't sit right with me on that.
Great. Is there anything in there you need clarified by Christie, or no? Or just a statement there, Councillor Pennell?
Thank you. That was just a statement for that part. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Is there any other questions with respect to slide number 4? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
You're gonna have to bear with me, but the $12.8 million, that shows great this year. But when you're putting the water to sewage plant, that reserves is gonna go. A lot of that's going to be consumed really quickly, correct?
Through your worship, that is correct. We expect to use a significant balance of our reserves for the wastewater treatment plant project. Again, we'll come back with a financing strategy when we get closer to knowing exactly what those costs will be. But I think another thing to note is that we have our impost reserve that can only be used for certain things. Our working reserve that, as mentioned earlier, it's kind of used as an emergency reserve that we hope to leave for those years where we have significant emergency situations and that sort of thing. But yes, these reserve balances, while they are at an all-time high, and it is great, we're expecting that that's not going to continue as the wastewater treatment plant project develops further.
Thanks, Chrissy. You're right. It's going to look substantially different by the time we get the new plan opened up. So is there any questions on page 4 or slide number 4 with respect to the executive summary? Deputy Mayor Calver.
Yeah, through your worship. So Christie, just to clarify, 12.8 million, a lot of people see that number and it's a big number and yeah, it's great. It's an all-time high. But that is including the impost reserve and the other reserve that can only be used for specific things. And that's why we need to do the 3% increase to keep us going when we do this new build. And can you give me a ballpark again? I know we've covered it before, but just for the people watching, the rough price on this new build?
I don't have exact numbers. I think it was floated around at the time, maybe 50 million. But we're certainly, getting closer to the detailed design and we'll have a better estimate there. Yes, that's correct. The impost reserves, my understanding is that, and our development charges can only be used for growth related needs, which obviously the wastewater treatment plant would be a great fit for that. But I believe we can only use a certain portion, a certain percentage when we do that. And again, the goal here is hopefully not to completely deplete our reserve balances. The wastewater treatment plant is a major project, but we have to continue to keep the rest of our infrastructure maintenance and upkeep and keep going there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Martin.
Yeah, I've been, along with what Councillor Pennell's been mentioning about the rate increases, I've been doing some research back, and every year it seems like we've had a surplus over budget. And I'm not really arguing about the 3%. I think that's a good starting point this year with the waste treatment plan update. And I thought I had everything in my head until Councillor Pennell mentioned this, but the overages, if we're over budget and the billing, we're billed for capital expense, is all of that going into reserve, like the over budget, everything that goes into a particular reserve?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, in the past, we have been under budget and we would put those back into our capital maintenance reserves, is my understanding. 2023, we budgeted to pull from reserves. And while we projected year end is expected to be a bit lower than we budgeted, we're still expecting to pull, I believe it was 1.1 million from reserves there. So we are using that to fund the budget as well. And again, in 2024, we're recommending to do that as well, just by 900, not just, but by 900,000 this year.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Martin.
Could I just say one more? I don't have a lot of questions, to be honest with you, because like I said, I've been sitting at my dining room table the last 3 or 4 days going through this. And to be honest, I'm totally impressed with the way you've put this draft budget type thing together, and as well as what you've presented here today. And so it's make me not have questions. So that was the only thing I just wanted to touch on for now. And I remember back in the 90s when everything was frozen up and we had to actually debenture the costs of those repairs that year in the 90s. And it was a lot of money, and the bills went up the next year quite substantially. And I'm impressed with the way our utilities division of the municipality has been run and the shape it's in right now. And I just want to put that out there. I'm impressed with the whole operation of it. So, but I'm especially impressed, Christy, with the way you've put this together. It explained everything to me, so I don't have questions. Thanks. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councilor Martin. Is there anything else with respect to slide number 4? Seeing none, we'll move on to the slide number 5, the WPCP upgrade project. Is there any questions with respect to that? Yep, Councilor Pennell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Christy, how much is that garage total? Because didn't we were just talking about some monies not too long ago, and there was $6 million or something, and now you're budgeting another $5 million?
So just to clarify, I don't have the exact numbers. Nathan might be able to speak here on that. But just to clarify, the 5.4 million is to continue to get that garage to completion. This was already approved with the project, I believe. But this is just showing what we're going to spend in the beginning of 2024. But it's also inclusive, the 5.4 million is inclusive of the detailed design for that phase 2. So our wastewater treatment plant expansion, and then projecting into later 2024 that we could potentially go to like a groundbreaking, what we would spend in that portion of the remainder of 2024. So this 5.4 is not just specific to the maintenance garage.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Councillor Shank.
Way I understood the 5.4 wasn't, it was basically just the rough building on the outside for the whole waste treatment plant. All right, it didn't have anything for the inside or anything else, but while they were doing the maintenance garage, they were building a whole structure for just like the shell. Is that correct? Or you're just building a garage for $5.4 million?
Through your worship, no, sorry. The $5.4 million budgeted in 2024 is in 2023, we budgeted to begin the building of our maintenance garage. And in 2024, the beginning of that, we will put, significant payments in the first quarter to complete that garage. And while that's being done, our engineers are working on detailed design of the wastewater treatment plant as well. But this is kind of phase 2 then going there. And then it will also include potentially groundbreaking and beginning the actual wastewater treatment plant project. So expansion of the existing plant or perhaps.
Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
Through
Nathan,
your
go
worship,
ahead.
no, what Christy said was correct. So the garage itself is close to $5.5, $6 million, all said and done. But the rest of the project, but as Christy described, part of the funds this year and next year for that, and then other work related to that will be for the actual water treatment plant itself. So I think we're looking at totals in 1 year, but it's a carry forward from this year into next. I shouldn't say carry forward, separate budget line item, but it's related to the same project, if that makes sense. So partially that expenditure is this year, partially next year, and then it'll move forward with the actual phase 2 as Christie's described, which is the actual plant itself.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So Nathan, so just for accounting purposes, you're keeping this all separate line items, what it actually cost for the building, what it cost for the engineering costs, what it costs, this, because we're just talking, bulk round numbers for the whole thing. It's just that it's very hard for me to understand that you're spending $5.4 million plus some engineering costs for the future things of that much for a garage. So when you hear just a garage for 5.4 million, no, it isn't, but you're keeping what the actual cost of the garage is going to be, because it just seems, you know what I mean? Am I the only one that's missing on this, or no?
Maybe I'll throw this out here, is that I think we're getting maybe hung up, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're not building a $5 million garage, even though we are building a $5 million garage. We're building the garage is part of the overall project of the wastewater treatment plant. And so the building of the garage is part and parcel to, and I'm sure that there'll be portions of that garage that most of that garage, if not all that garage, is going to be used for the plant. And the garage that they're building is required to facilitate what needs to be done with respect to that wastewater treatment plant. So yes, that would be my understanding of it. And I hope I'm correct in that, but I And I know where we're getting hung up on it because we're saying, why are we spending $5 million on a garage? It's a garage. We don't need a $5 million garage, but it is part and parcel to the whole project. And it's part and parcel to providing the complete package with respect to the wastewater treatment plant. I hope I'm correct.
Just to clarify, yes, that is correct. So the maintenance building, the proceeding with the maintenance building allowed us to sell the 45 commercial court building. So our staff will now have a location for, to do maintenance to store parts and equipment and that sort of thing, office space. And this will be kind of, yes, part and parcel with the wastewater treatment plant expansion. It wasn't originally going to go first, but with the sale of commercial court, that's where we're at. And just to clarify, in 2023, we've spent 4.5 million to basically, that does include a bit of design towards the wastewater treatment plant expansion, the actual process, or what we should call phase 2. And then the remainder of that 6 million for rounding sake will be spent out of that or pulled out of that 5.4 in 2024. What we can do, because I get this is confusing, maybe we should have proposed it as different lines in the budget. We could either bring it back or at at the point of basically our funding strategy, we can break everything down so everyone fully understands where the dollars and cents go and toward what's towards phase 1, what's towards phase 2, that sort of thing.
Okay, Councilor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Chrissy, that's a fantastic idea. Just to give us some clarity. Because when I read this over and over, I see design / maintenance, building / construction. Those slashes meant nothing to me. I just read it all, right? Threw it all into one group. Having this conversation settled me down, you know, because so it's a lot better. And if you could do that at the time of funding, when you come back, that would be very helpful for myself. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councilor Pennell. Deputy Mayor Calver.
Through you, your worship. How many square feet are we building for a garage?
We can come back with that information. I don't know offhand.
Yeah, I just want the general public. I've seen the structure. It's a fair size. It's not just a little 2.5 car garage. We're going to put a couple of trucks in. So it's a fair size building we're building down there.
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions with respect to the WPCP upgrade project slide? Seeing none, moving on. We have a staff recommendation. We probably covered most of that, but is there any questions with respect to that staff recommendation? Yeah, sorry, that was page 6, Dave. Page 7, the average residential consumption, the graph that's on there, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Is there any questions with respect to that? The keynote average consumption, there's some information on there. Is there any questions with respect to that? And that would be page 8 of the slide presentation. Yep, Councilor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Christy, could you just help me out with residential fine? That's great. But the 88% of it's a residential fine. How does it work when we have multi-use, like commercial on one, like say downtown where we have storefronts down on the main floor, and then we have residential above? Is that all being classified as residential, or how does that work?
Often through your worship, I believe most or some would have different water meters depending on their tenants. So perhaps if there was residential on top, they may have a separate water meter and be billed according to that. If not, they are billed based on the size of the meter. And then, as mentioned earlier, the rates are the same except for when we get into that declining block. So if they use over 1,000 cubes, they would be charged the additional rate. Residential typically would never get anywhere near that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Pennell. Is there anything further with respect to page 8 of that presentation. Seeing none, page 9 discusses the operating expenditures. Is there any conversations or questions with respect to the operating expenditure slide? Seeing none, page 10, operating expenditure keynotes. There's a little bit of information in there. Is there any questions with respect to that? Seeing none, salaries and benefits, fairly self-explanatory on page 11. Any questions, Councillor Pennell?
Thank you, Worship, through you. Christie, we see a staff or a position being removed and it's being switched over to contract. Where does those numbers show up in the budget for that contract staff position?
So that was included in the projected budget for 2024, the contract for the salaries.
Okay, thanks. So it's in
In that total of,
line 30 or line 86 then?
in the total wages and benefits for 2024 at 1.9 million on the summary page, line 20.
Great, thank you.
There's nothing further. The page 12 capital expenditures for 2024. Is there any questions or comments with respect to that? Yeah, Deputy Mayor Cover.
Yeah, through your worship. So back to the forklift, did we ever look at leasing, leasing a brand new one? And
Yeah, through your worship, Deputy Mayor Culver, we did look at leasing them. However, it's the same kind of story. It depends what they have available at the time. And just in talking with a couple different companies and representatives, to meet our needs with it, which isn't, a brand new one, our best bet is to get one that just come off a lease with a, 3-4 years of use kind of thing, would be the best value for us as a utility.
yeah, okay, no, I just know with my own business, in lots of cases, you're better off leasing, but if you've looked at all the options, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Cover. Is there any other further questions? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship, through you, Christie. Just to be clear, and to maybe put residents at ease for this year, there's no big digs going on for 2024 without, other than the exception of maybe Jim Kimmett Boulevard with the relining.
That's correct. From a utilities perspective, we don't foresee any major capital replacement in ground other than Jim Kimmett, which is actually wouldn't affect the roadway there. It's in behind a plaza there.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Pennell. Is there anything further? Seeing none, the capital debentures chart on page 13. Is there any questions with respect to that? I think it's fairly self-explanatory. And I do like seeing all the zeros there. Page 14, the 2024 projected revenue with the pie chart there. Is there any questions or comments with respect to that? Yeah, Councillor Shank.
This pertains to the usage of reserves for offsetting your budget. You know what I mean? I see 28%, that's the federal funding that we got for the treatment plant. All right. So you take that out of the equation, but you're not going to have the expenditure on that side either. So that's going to offset, you know what I mean? So you're not going to need that. But when it came down, I don't know if this is the correct slide, but you were using 900 some odd thousand this year to offset your budget. Now, sometimes that's a catch-22. I always believe the reserves should be reserves for in case of emergencies, a line bad freeze up or whatever. But my philosophy is to use the reserves for emergencies. Try to stay within your budget for what your operation, your capital improvements are based on rather than trying to offset, because it's not giving you a true taxation of what you're billing at, what your revenue is, because you're using almost $1 million, all right, to compensate the budget you have there, you're taking out of reserves. So you're putting into reserve, taking out of reserves, all right, to do your budget. So in future years, now this is just me, this is not all council, is if you could kind of wean off of using the reserves and try to find the efficiencies in operating a business that you stay within it. You still put as much money into the reserve, so in case you have a bad year or freeze up, then you can use it. But you're basically day-to-day operational and capital improvements, you know what I mean? For every year, you know what I mean? Stay within that. Am I making this clear, or am I just muddying the waters? No, am I? All right. Christy, do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, through you. We typically, I guess, I don't want to say in normal years, but typically we do present our budget or prepare our budget that we have excess revenue that goes towards our reserves. Again, the last 2 years and the next few, we do have significant costs associated with the wastewater treatment plant, phase 1 and 2. So it's kind of not usual for us to have to pull from these reserves in the past. It is shown on slide 19, but I think next year when we create that slide, I think we're going to do 3 colors because it's showing, and I guess we'll get there again because we're going back through, but it's showing where either pulling from reserves or from revenue sources like funding, and it's kind of not completely clear. I do, yes. And that's typically how we prepare our budgets or strive to.
Yep, great. Go ahead, Nathan.
Sorry, through your worship, just to your comment there, Councillor Shank, if you look at the breakdown of the revenue, that capital surcharge is actually the contribution to reserve on an annual basis. So we're not just pulling out, we are also contributing too. So there is actually a surplus of contribution to the reserve. We're pulling from, it's basically deferred portion, but we are still contributing to that on an annual basis as well. So that's not dropping off. It's not like we're above the contribution itself as well. I guess in this term, if we pulled 3.5 million, we would be, 900,000 above what we're taking in, but we're still putting in a significant amount on the reserve side as well. So that I just want to make sure that's clear.
Thanks, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to, one thing that's always amazed me is there always seems to be more goes down the drain than comes out the tap. And in other words, our sewer charges, our revenue is higher than our water charges. And I'm just, how is that possible?
Through you, if you go back to our rate schedule, and I don't think we need to go specifically back to it, but we have significant costs associated with the treatment of our wastewater, the collection of it and that sort of thing. So our costs are higher in our rate schedule for the treatment on the sewer side.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Is there anything further with respect to this slide? Seeing none, the utilities revenue keynote slide, page 15 of the presentation. Is there any questions with respect to that? Seeing none, the graph historical rate increases, again, fairly self-explanatory, I think, page 16. Is there any questions or comments with respect to that? Seeing none, the next chart on page 17, the rate increase versus the additional revenue. Again, fairly straightforward, but is there any questions or comments with respect to that? Seeing none, the next one is the financial impact to the customer. Page 18, I think we've probably been through this, but is there any questions with respect to that? Seeing none. The next is the graph chart historical budgets, which talks about reserves and the total budget less reserves. Page 19 on the presentation. Do we have any questions or comments with respect to that? Seeing none. Page 20, the declining block rate structure keynotes. I know this one is a little bit confusing, at least for me anyways, but is there any questions or comments with respect to this slide? Okay, seeing none. The next one, page 21, existing declining block rate structure, commercial only. Is there any questions or comments with respect to this slide? Seeing none. The 2024 rate schedule, or at least the proposed rate schedule, again, talks about the 3% increase. Is there any questions or comments with respect to this slide? Seeing none. Page 23, the 2023 rate comparison, which compares us to another number of other municipalities in our area. Is there any questions or comments with respect to that? Councillor Pennell?
Thank you, Worship. Just a comment, and Christy touched base on this earlier, is I'm glad to hear that this comparison isn't apples to apples. You know, I hear every once in a while that our water is so much more expensive than Toronto. It's a rate of scale. You know, there's things like that. So I'm just glad to hear that that everybody recognizes that it's not apples to apples, because, you know, I'm more worried about our own residents than looking across the boundaries and seeing how they're doing it and stuff like that. I understand completely why the chart is here. But I'm also, you know, we're looking after our own residents here and stuff like that. So that was just a comment about that rate comparison. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. And you do bring up a good point, even though we think we live next door to our neighbors, that everything should be the same, but it really doesn't. It isn't, because we all have differences, right? So it is a good point, but it's encouraging to see that we're extremely competitive with our neighbors anyways. So the next one, reserve balances. There's two charts on there on page 2024, the capital maintenance reserves and the impost working reserves. Is there any questions or comments with respect to that? Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Are DC impost reserves, or is that what you call an impost reserve? Like, you know, development charge, and then a certain portion of that goes to fire and all the other different agencies. Is that in here under impost, or where does that under here?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, historically, we collected impost, or up until partway through 2023, we did collect impost specific to water and sewer, and now it is incorporated in the development charges. So it will look different in future years because it's in basically one separate account or charge, but
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Your Worship. Yeah, so Christy's correct. So we collect them to, so previously, if somebody came in and they're a developer and they had to make a payment on this, they'd actually have to make, you know, pay for the permit, pay for their DC charges, and pay for their impost. So it'd be 3 separate transactions. With the new DC bylaw, you still have to make 2, unfortunately, but one is for directly just for your permit or whatever, and the other would be for DCs. At year end, we would do an allocation from our DCs to say X percentage, and it's all based on the DC bylaw. So X percentage goes towards the impost. So it's collected differently, but it's accounted for the same way.
Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
DCs are actually the impost that you're showing here.
Correct. It's really just a different name for them, but yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Councillor Shank. Is there anything else, Councillor Pennell?
Thank you, through your worship. Christy, is there in these capital maintenance reserves, is there some monies coming back into here from East Street construction that was borrowed out of their reserves, or is it showed in here?
Yeah, go ahead, Nathan.
Through your worship. So I know there was some discussion on this a while back on how that was all going to be funded. So on the town side, we only funded for capital construction. So that included our surface treatment and the East Street reconstruction, what our OSIF and gas tax funding was. So that was our full allocation. Once we know where our capital lies with that, so that was basically straight up just all of our reconstruction and maintenance program for public works. If we're under budget on that, which based on what we brought back last time, we were looking to be a little bit, we can transfer some of what was committed to surface treatment to that. And then any outstanding, the understanding was that it would be funded through utilities reserves and then transferred back when the town could repay it. So we're not sure where we sit yet, but at year end, we should be able to give a full picture of what that is. So we may have to temporarily borrow that. That's correct. We just don't know the amount at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
through
go ahead,
you,
Kristen.
one thing just to note is the change in using the provincial funding for our improving our discharges for wastewater and stormwater. We were able to, that $527,000, we were using that towards the East Street project, which will have significant effect for both Public Works and Utilities, because Public Works looks after the stormwater portion of that project.
Thanks, Christy. Is there anything else? Seeing none, on to the page 25, the overall summary. Is there any questions with respect to the overall summary that's before us? Seeing none, and we've worked our way through the slides. Where do we want to go from here, Christy?
I believe that's a Jessica question. I think we can go back to the agenda, and I'm finished with my presentation.
Great. Okay. If that's the presentation, is there anything that we haven't covered yet that somebody would like to ask any questions now that we have Christy's attention? Seeing none. Thank you, Christy. It obviously, I always like doing the utilities ones because it's usually always good news, you know, relatively speaking, compared to some of the other budgets we look at. But I think it's, we just have to keep in mind that we've got probably the largest investment that we're going to have as a municipality coming forward with respect to the wastewater treatment plant. So, and without it, we do not have the ability to move forward as a municipality, as a community. So yes, it looks all rosy now, but we will have to sharpen our pencils and tighten our belts, I'm sure, in the coming weeks and years to make sure that we can provide what we need to provide to the community. So, but thank you very much for the presentation. If there's nothing further, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Cover.
I'd just like to say, like, this presentation was absolutely phenomenal. Very straightforward. It's nice to see all of our questions being answered. Great job.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Cover. If there's not, yep, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, sorry, just process wise for everybody's clarity, if there are no significant outstanding questions or concerns that council has at this point, as Christy did flag in her presentation, the truck piece will be discussed in more detail on November 16th, assuming there is some clear direction at that meeting and no further changes to this budget. Our intention would be to issue our required public notice on November 23rd so that the proposed rate schedule and budget can be adopted at the December 19th meeting. That's the tentative plan at this moment, but again, if there's any needed changes, we do have some room still to make those before those bylaws need to be adopted.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, through your worship. I think I'm not sure if there's going to be any changes from what I see, but I'd really like to see the breakdown on the maintenance on the garage thing before you're asking us for an approval, right? To be able to release this. So I'd like to see that prior to doing that.
Is that something that can be brought back in the immediate future?
Yes, we can certainly provide that at a regular council meeting if that's something you would like to see, for sure.
And Madam Clerk, is that something that we can do, we can have before we move forward with the bylaw?
Through your worship, yes, we have 2 council meetings before the meeting where the proposed bylaw would be brought forward.
Great, thank you. What are we looking for as a resolution for this evening then, Madam Clerk? Note and receive and the one that I have in front of me. We were looking for a motion with respect to that council receive for information the proposed 2024 Greater Napanee Utilities operating and capital budgets as presented, and further that subject to any direction given at this meeting, council directed a bylaw to adopt the 2024 Greater Napanee Utilities operating capital budgets and water and sewer service charges at the rate presented come forward at the December 19th, 2023 meeting for final approval following the prior required notice being completed. Am I correct with that? I think, Madam Clerk. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Martin. If we have no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. And we'll look for a motion to confirm the proceedings for the bylaw. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. Read a first, second, and finally passed this second day of November 2023. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried, and a motion for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, folks, and we'll see you next week.